Well, we are here because we want to invite you into a conversation that we've been having as part of the leadership of the Oregon Christian Convention. Not all the leadership, in fact, a very small minority of the leadership of the Oregon Christian Convention. But to have a conversation with you that we've been having about the future of where the Oregon Christian Convention is going. A lot has changed over the last couple years, and so one of the first things that changed was you were president when the convention itself, the week of convention, changed its name from the Oregon Christian Convention to the Northwest Christian Convention, right?
Yep.
And what was the idea behind that week's change from Oregon to Northwest?
It was both kind of looking back and looking forward. Just looking forward, we wanted to make sure we were communicating that week of gathering included all of our brothers and sisters in the Pacific Northwest. But also looking back at the heritage, that was part of the foundation of the founding of the Oregon Christian Convention when the Oregon Territory, before states existed, included all of the Pacific Northwest. So it was really an effort to more honestly reflect what was happening, because we were drawing people from Washington and Idaho and Montana, but we wanted to capture that and carry that moving forward with the name.
So, I mean, when you're talking about who we are, how did we decide to put a boundary, here? That's like I'm a global Christian worker.
Yeah.
And there are in reality.
Yeah.
I mean, in reality, there are no boundaries.
Yeah.
But, we can do what we can do.
And I've been relatively new to this community, but it seems to me that, some staples of the week of convention have been George Johnson, who's out of Seattle area, has been Boise Bible College, which is not Oregon, and what was intended to include and unite a region that is really distinct in ethos and in culture to the rest of America, especially the Christian church in the Northwest, became a symbol, instead of unity, of division.
Yeah.
Of if you're on the other side of the river, you're not, this isn't for you. And so you guys led a movement to say, let's get back to our roots of being a place of gathering all the churches in the Northwest. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. I think it's also just there is a distinctive about the Northwest.
Yes.
And
we are different.
The older I get, the more I realize the Northwest is a unique place.
Yeah.
So I think the distinctives that aren't divisive, that's what we wanted to do.
Yeah.
Because even if it was intended to divide, it wasn't very successful. I mean, I know several people from Washington who have been faithful comers for decades. They're not even able to participate in business meetings, but they've been attending it faithfully and been a part of it. I mean, I don't know that it's ever really been only Oregon.
So
it's just been in the name.
So you may have heard, maybe you guys have seen, right after COVID happened, Barna came out, I don't remember David Kinnaman is the head of Barna now, and came out and said that within 18 months they thought that because of COVID, 1 in 5 churches would close, right? And then later in August, he was asked again by NPR, of all places, that was kind of a bold claim. Did you really think that 1 in 5 churches would close? And he came back and said, no, we think we were wrong. We think we were too conservative. We think it'll be more. And then I saw him later in an interview. Apparently I stalked David Kinnaman. and he said he didn't think that churches would run out of people or money. They'd run out of pastors.
Yeah.
And I think we are a unique region with so few churches that we have to do everything we can to hold ourselves together, to carry our burdens one with another, to walk together. And so we have been having this conversation about how do we broaden our reach and support the whole of the church in the Northwest, not just the churches in Oregon and not just for a single week. So we've been having a conversation about changing our name of the organization to reflect that broad and that wanting to support. And when we're having that conversation, the word network came up in place of convention, and you had some really helpful ideas around how a network would be that, where we have a risk of this kind of a tsunami of church closures impending, and how we can be a part of holding that together.
I have in my mind, I don't know if it's a metaphor or picture, but in my mind I picture an actual literal net, for network, and so each strand of a net is a congregation somewhere in the Northwest. Okay, and in my mind, I picture Jesus working on the net, and he's tying hundreds of strands of congregations together so that he can do his work well. And what he has in mind is a big catch of the world that God so loves. And so when I think of network, I just have this visual of Jesus on the putting congregations of his people together to do his work well.
That's good.
I like that visual because it makes me think, if you want to catch a lot of fish, you don't use a rod and reel and a single thread, right? Like that's not how you catch a bunch. If you need to catch a whole lot, you use a net. You use a bunch of strands woven together. And too often we just end up pole fishing because we've got our one solitary strand out there trying to catch fish. And every once in a while we snag one, but together we do a lot more.
That couldn't have been the vision of Jesus when he says, I'll make you fishers of men.
Yeah.
That I'll give you each a pole and an invisible line to go out there.
Yeah, no,
Just get them one at a time.
Solo.
yeah.
And sometimes we get stuck in that because just doing local ministry can become so overwhelming that it becomes hard to have your eye on a bigger kingdom thing than just trying to stay afloat in your church and what you're doing and paying the bills and caring for your people. And my understanding as I've come into this is that part of this thing that we do here is to try and not add on another thing to the local church, but to come around and say, hey, can we be with you? Can we walk with you? Can we join with you? And so, just recently, last year or two, you were part of a team that started the Unity Project, right? That was a way of trying to serve churches. Tell us a little bit about what that's looked like and what that's done over the last little bit.
Yeah, so the first year that we got together and did it, it was a very traditional gathering. We were here on the convention grounds and we invited people, and we had about 100, I think, or so people from a bunch of different congregations. And we were able to bring in some people from the Churches of Christ or from some Disciples Brothers, and it was great. But it was a traditional kind of event, and it was a really good way to kick things off. But then, obviously, during COVID, we weren't able to do that. This was actually, we did the first one right before COVID had started. So we had some time to think about it. What we ended up doing is we decided to focus on congregational unity, and we created something that people could use in their churches, because we realized in a normal gathering, we'd have 100 people, maybe 5 from any one congregation, and they might go back and talk to their congregation about what they had learned, but most of the congregation wasn't there. We created something that you could take back to your congregation and have the congregation have the conversation about unity.
Yeah.
And what that means is the Unity Project never happened here. It's only been happening in churches and in small groups, and it can happen anytime. Anybody can use it, and to have a conversation in their congregation about unity. And there are so many reasons right now why churches might need to have that conversation. And the result of it isn't at the point, we were very intentional that we didn't think we just needed more video content. There's so much of that out there. We needed people to be able to have a conversation. And so that was a way we could support churches, to give them an opportunity to sit down and have conversations they might be avoiding or may not know how to have, or they may need someone else to start it and be able to talk about unity in their congregation. And so that's been really cool to see, and to see it be picked up by different churches and in different places, and it's just been its own unique way of supporting churches in the unity.
So in your scenario with the Unity Project, it's not been centered around convening here, not around the weekend convention or around an event. It's been about connecting all of the resources that we have throughout all of our churches and all of the schools that we have and all the friends that we have to serve all the churches together, right? More like you were saying about a network, about intertwining everything together. And this last fall, we did the pastors only thing very similarly. COVID happened and we were far from being able to gather a lot of people together. And so we had microsite gatherings. We had gatherings of 10 to 15 people, several of them across the state of Oregon, but then we had people joining us from Washington and Idaho as well, so that we could kind of gather together all of our resources and serve everyone collectively together, not just focus on gathering here, but networking and serving each other as best as we can, right?
Yeah.
I think the power of that is in not just those events. Those events facilitate, like, to use your metaphor, like the knots where the net comes together. That's relationships with each other.
Yeah.
And the power of the network that we are now is relational. To me, as a pastor, it's that I know that I have friends that are in the same mission field I am, that we can, commiserate and share resources and inspire each other, and just know that we're not alone. There's a survey coming out next month that will reveal that across the nation, pastors that were surveyed, over 60% said that they feel extremely or severely lonely, right? And I think that is what's going to, that's the thing about, we'll run out of pastors before we run out of people. And so we got to fight against that and intentionally be relational about equipping and building up God's church. And, especially in our network where we have a history of kind of being independent.
Yeah.
That can have its detriment. So.
Yeah. I've been thinking about how, like, when I was a youth pastor, one of the things that changed for summer camps is all the competition with football camps and all the other summer programming the kids were getting. Their summers were so much more clogged than when I was a kid. And I think that's generally happening, that there are so many more things going on. It's really easy for a person to be unable to join us here for something. But what we've been able to do, what we've been forced to do the last year, is bring the convention or the network to people, bring it to churches, so that you don't have to come to us. And that's a whole other way of supporting churches. And I think a great tool for us to have in our belt is to be able to go to churches or send things to churches, as opposed to saying you have to be able to make it here on this particular date. Because honestly, the most valuable thing the convention's given me is the relationships. Like, I moved here from Eastern Oregon 3 years ago. All the pastors that I know through the convention. But the value in that has been the relationships we've maintained throughout the year and the way we've been able to interact. And that's been incredibly helpful to me. And I want everybody to be able to have that, to be able to have that interaction that's constant, that's really supports us in the times that we actually need it, not just when we're able to be here.
Yeah.
Diane, you are probably the greatest historian I know about the Oregon Christian Convention.
Yes.
Does all this stuff we're talking about connecting churches and serving one another and pooling resources, does that seem in line with what the convention has really been about for most of the last 169 years?
Yeah, I think it actually defines the word convention better, because back like when C.F. Swander was going around to churches, he was exactly doing what we're talking about. He created a network of ministering, figuring out what churches needed, and then finding resources to help them, which we can do in different ways now, but that's what he did. And it's like really exciting to call it what it is, so we can move forward with a vision of connecting the Northwest. And I just say, like, during COVID, one of the things that for me was little yet felt big was I have all these lists of all these churches and I could pray for them.
Yeah.
That's all I could do, but it was really cool to put their names all over my walls inside the office and pray for them and feel this network of prayer going out. And I think that's just one thing we can do, but I would love to see us just give resources and connection and help, really give help to pastors and leaders. And I think we can do that, and we are doing it, and we can do it more and more. And to change the name helps us to communicate who we are to people who don't know us at all.
Yeah.
So much better. I
Yeah.
just love the idea.
Yeah, which brings us to that the conversation we've been having is about changing the name of the nonprofit from the Oregon Christian Convention to the Northwest Christian Network. And the thing is like names have weight. You know, I mean, we've got 2 children. We spent a lot of effort with our first child, really trying to think of like, what are we gonna name? And then you think of a name and you tell your spouse and you're like, oh, I really like this name. And they're like, oh, I had a really weird person in 3rd grade that had the name. We can't name our kid, right?
Yeah.
Totally.
Because names elicit things, and even biblically, they had that much more weight, that they carried. But names still mean something. So when someone completely unfamiliar, someone like me a couple years ago hears
Yeah.
Oregon Christian Convention, there are things that it elicits, and they're not always helpful, and they're not always true to what it is. Because when I came into this by Terry O'Casey, I understood the Oregon Christian Convention to be a week that happened a lot of times in really hot weather right before the 4th of July, right? That's what I understood this to be. And that was the summation of it. But as we've even talked about today, and a lot of people very familiar are going to know, there's so much more to the ministry of what happens here. There are a lot of other things we haven't even talked about that go on, events and ways that we serve churches and want to serve churches. And so the desire is to pursue changing the name to the Northwest Christian Network to not only serve the geography that we were intended to originally serve, and the unique corner of our nation that is very similar. We really have to hold each other together. We got to walk with each other. We got to make this through together, and to be a network instead of being focused on or implying that we're focused on a single convening, to be a way that we can create a really huge net. And sometimes in that net, I get to hold you, and sometimes in that net, you hold me. But when we can hold each other, we get to see God do greater and more things in the kingdom in our little corner that we have been called to steward, that we call the Northwest.
I do think a theme that's kind of come up as we've been talking is talking about pastors and what our experience has been in COVID. And I've just now been thinking, if I'm a pastor who's isolated and has been struggling through the past year and a half, and I'm looking for support, what am I looking for? Am I looking for a convention, or am I looking for a network?
Yeah.
And in terms of what those words mean to people who don't know us, because it's fine for us to know who we are, but our name is how we tell other people who we are.
Right.
People who are looking, people who are in need, who are searching. And if I were a pastor in need, I wouldn't be looking for a convention, because I know going to one event isn't going to fix it, or isn't going to turn it around. I'm looking for a network to become a part of, to be supported by. And so if we want to cast a vision for people of who we are and who we can be to them, I believe in the Northwest Christian Network. I want to be a part of that network. I just think that's really valuable.